You're listening to theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
Welcome to the Travel Show.
Hey, it's a splendid idea. Podcasting around the world.
The UK's best podcasting show for world travellers of all ages. Welcome again.
It's a podcast full of hints and tips for travellers of all ages travelling to all places.
It's all about getting out and having much more fun.
Hello and welcome to The Travel Show. It's a podcast all about the exciting world of overseas travel, be it a gap year, a sabbatical, a life-changing long-term trip, or just an extended holiday. We're going to kick off this series with the subject which is probably the single most important thing which could affect the whole outcome of your trip, wherever you go, and that is your health. We speak to Susan Taylor, a practice nurse specialising in world travel health. So I first asked Sue, what is the single biggest mistake that people make when coming to see her and discussing their health requirements for their trip?
Allowing enough time to plan for their vaccinations before going away on any trip that they want to take, really. I think that's the biggest thing.
So what is the longest vaccination time for any one of the particular injections? I mean, what's the maximum?
Well, the maximum is 6 months for Hep B, but obviously you're not going to think about it 6 months in advance. I mean, some people do, but usually I would say 2 months, because you can have an accelerated schedule for some of the vaccines. And although it's not the optimum effectiveness of a vaccine by having it accelerated, it usually is enough for what you need when you're travelling abroad.
Okay, so from a clinic point of view, what is the perfect case scenario of somebody who's going for a gap year trip or going for some long trip, more than a couple of weeks, and they come to you with what? What is the perfect scenario for you?
Right, well, I would suggest that the first thing they do when they decide they want to do some travelling is that they speak to their practice nurse. It doesn't matter how much in advance it is, even if it's a year in advance, even if they're just thinking about it. I think it's worth going along to their practice nurse, asking them something about risks of travel, areas of risk. You may be directed towards some websites that you can go and have a look at and give you some idea of what's involved and what injections you may need, what costs may be incurred, and whether you are healthy enough to travel to certain areas that may be more risky than others.
So firstly, do people's needs vary? So, for example, people that are diabetic or may have a different sort of medical need, does it make a massive difference to their travel preparation?
Yes, it can do, definitely. There's not such a big difference in what you need as far as vaccinations are concerned, because if you're generally healthy, even if you're diabetic or what have you, you can still have the vaccinations that you need to have. It'll be other things that we'll talk about later that might change. But the other thing that you need to take into account is under 25s are usually covered for most of the childhood diseases. You can check with your practice nurse or GP about that, but you should be covered unless there was some reason that your parents didn't want you vaccinated as a child. Then it would be important that you started on those vaccinations straight away, because you would need to go through the primary course. You need to start from scratch. So most under 25s, they will be covered, and then the two injections you would need would be Hep A and typhoid, and those are free. So those are your general vaccinations that you need to go away anywhere. And then depending on what other countries you want to go to, that's when you get into the other
The additional
The
injections.
additional injections.
Which
yeah.
brings me on to my next question, really, is most people I've spoken to really tend to sort of go away for their 3-month trip that they've got planned, and then perhaps do a little bit more travelling after that, up to, should we say, I don't know, 6 months, possibly more. Does it make a massive difference as regards the injections, or is it purely the locations and obviously the time of year, whether it's monsoon season and all this sort of thing?
Well, those obviously have a bearing on it, but it's time. The longer you're away, the greater your risk. And, you know, mixing with in the rural areas with the local population, all that's going to increase your risk, and where you're going to be, how long you're going to be at risk. The nurse will go through that, or the doctor will go through that and work out what your risks will be. The vaccinations that are available for you, you don't have to have them. They are only recommendations. But, you know, it's very sensible to listen to medical advice and take it, really.
Most travellers, when they leave home and go to a new area, particularly when it's a new diet and new types of food, probably will suffer from diarrhoea in some form or other. Let's talk about that first of all. What should people consider, and how many people get it? Is everybody susceptible to getting that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's very common, very common. You'll probably find about 50% of travellers will get some sort of diarrhoea to some extent. Obviously, you can have just a bit of a tummy bug and cramps, right up to being very unwell, where you have to go to the doctor and get medical advice and perhaps antibiotic treatment. But it's just being careful with hygiene. I mean, obviously, it's not that easy if you are in remote rural areas, because hygiene can be very difficult, you know.
And, of course, somebody else is preparing your food, aren't they?
Exactly. And, you know, and where you get your food from, you know, if you're just getting it from street vendors, or if you do get it, which, you know, is pretty likely, then just weather it out for 48 hours, because your body's trying to flush the toxins. And which is why you've got your diarrhoea. So keep hydrated, as long as you know that the water's safe. Drink plenty of water. Take your rehydration sachets or salts that you can take with you, so that you don't get dehydrated. And if you've got some paracetamol or whatever to take for the stomach cramps, just to make yourself comfortable, you know, stay where you are and weather it out. Don't try to keep walking. And a good tip is to use some flat coke. Flat coke's very good, settles your stomach, and if you put a pinch of salt in it, if you can get some salt, that will keep you rehydrated as well, if you haven't got the sachets, or you've forgotten to buy them or whatever.
So after 48 hours, then, if it's still really bad, seek medical advice, but hopefully it will have flushed itself through the system.
Well, I mean, it should be getting better after 48 hours. I mean, they can last a long time, but there are some very nasty bugs out there. And, you know, if you're feeling worse or no better and you've got bloody diarrhoea, then I think you need to get to some medical centre and get some treatment, probably antibiotics.
OK, well, instead of, you obviously, hopefully, not dealing with the problem, but if you have to deal with it, that's great advice. How about preventing getting it in the first place? What would you say on that?
It's just hygiene. That's the most important thing. Hygiene and watching what you eat and what you drink. Be sure that the water supply is okay before you drink it. And that also applies to things like ice cubes and cleaning your teeth. Ice
creams, of course. Yeah.
Ice creams, yeah. Local cheeses. I mean, a lot of foodstuffs. Unpasteurised milk. We forget that all our milk's being treated, and that may not be the case in rural areas. If you're cooking yourselves, you're cooking meat, cook it thoroughly. Eat it while it's still hot. Don't have any leftovers. Fish and shellfish, they can be hazardous if they're farmed in contaminated waters. So speak to the locals. They'll usually know whether they're all right to eat. You should peel all the fruit you eat, even things like tomatoes, because, you know, they'll have been washed probably in contaminated water. So, avoid salads, cook your vegetables, and avoid any food that's been lying around or on a stall or been exposed to flies. washing up your dishes properly in clean water, and always washing your hands before and after food preparation, going to the toilet, things like, just basic hygiene, really.
Well, a lot of places I know don't have, for example, hot water washing facilities in the toilet, so these hand gels and hand wipes now are quite useful for that sort of thing, aren't they?
Yeah, they're excellent, and they're very easy to carry around. You get them in little sachets and little squeezy, they don't take up much room, and yeah, they're excellent. You can just put them on your hands, wash it with a bit of, you can wash it with some water, and then if you've got mud, obviously, and it's dirty, then wash it in some water and then apply your gel afterwards just to get rid of all the bacteria.
Right. Now, the other diseases that you're actually having injections against and so on really can all be caught the same way, I guess.
Yes, I think it all comes down to hygiene, and not all of them, but most of them down to hygiene. Things like the hepatitis A, which is a liver infection. That can happen with contaminated foods, water, where sanitation isn't as good as ours. And the injection for that is free. You will be given that. You don't have to pay for that one. Typhoid, again, with hygiene and sanitation, and usually transmitted by contaminated water, usually fecal contamination in the water, and you can get an injection, a vaccination for that. That's free, so you won't have to pay for that one. And then other ones are, it's usually either hygiene, person-to-person contact, or biting insects. That's usually how these diseases, are caught and transmitted.
Well, we've talked about hepatitis B. There's hepatitis A and hepatitis B. Can you just give us a bit of explanation what that disease actually is?
Well, hepatitis A, as I say, they both affect the liver. And I'm sure everybody's heard of hepatitis C as well, which is a lot more common, and that's spread by blood products, as is hepatitis B. Contaminated blood, if you've had used needles, having tattoos or piercings, it's a no-no when you go abroad. Don't suddenly think, oh, that looks a great tattoo, you see them doing in the street. Do not have them, because they will probably not be using sterile equipment. And that is a surefire way of getting hepatitis B, which is a very nasty infection of the liver, and in some cases can lead to liver cancer. So, it is a serious thing that you need to be...
It's worth avoiding then.
It certainly is worth avoiding. But if you do have a vaccination against that, you would have to pay for it. Unfortunately, it's not free, and that's one of them that has quite a long time span. It's 6 months to go the normal route, but obviously, if you haven't got that length of time, you can have an accelerated schedule, which will give you enough protection for your travel purposes.
Okay. A couple of the others that I know is still about is rabies and yellow fever. Is that a common thing you have to help people prevent?
Well, yellow fever is different in that you have to have a certificate to go to some countries. If you've been somewhere where yellow fever is endemic, which is another thing that is transmitted by the bite of a mosquito, very nasty fever, then you are required to have a certificate, because they will not let you into certain countries. If you've been through an infected country, they will not let you into their country unless they know you've been vaccinated. So it's one you have to pay for. You have to get it from a licensed yellow fever health centre, which you can find out either online or your practice. If they don't do it, they'll tell you where you can get it. And it's one injection, but you need to give it 10 days before you enter whatever area you're going to, because the certificate's not valid for 10 days because you won't be protected.
This time element, I didn't realise it, but it's all about building the antibodies up, isn't it? And each injection has a certain incubation time, I presume.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, most of them, it's about 2 to 3 weeks to build up your optimum antibody response. So, you've got to consider that 3 weeks as well as the length of time it takes to get your vaccinations in. Some of them are just one-offs. Your hepatitis A, your typhoid, yellow fever. They're one-offs, but things like hepatitis B, you need 3 injections. A very rare disease called Japanese encephalitis, which again is transmitted by mosquitoes and ticks. Then that is 3 vaccinations that you have to have over a month. Rabies you spoke about. You know that's transmitted by animals that have got rabies, any sort of animals, not just dogs. And if you are going to somewhere that's remote, out of the way for prolonged periods, you would be wise to have the rabies vaccine, and that again is 3 injections over a period of a month. So that's why you need to get there at least 8 weeks in advance so you can get all these vaccinations in. You're going to be like a pincushion, and your wallet's going to be a bit emptier because they will cost you.
There's also a case of tempering something like the rabies. If you're just passing through an area fairly quickly and you're not going deep off the track, do you just avoid animals rather than just mess around with them, don't you?
Certainly. I mean, just avoid all animals, even if you think they're tame. You know, just avoid them all. If you see an animal, just throw a stone, distract it, scare it away. If you're, as you say, if you're only passing through, you do not need to go through a rabies vaccination schedule. But if you are going to be, yes, off the beaten track in a remote area and you're away from medical facilities, it's a killer, so you're best to be protected.
Talking about killers, the good old mosquito. We haven't sort of touched on the malaria part of the effect that has on travellers, because again, it's the one thing that most people, because it's just simple taking a range of tablets, tend to discard very easily. But it's quite a nasty disease, isn't it?
Very nasty. Again, it can kill you. There's 4 types of malaria, and the nastiest can kill you in space of 24 hours. So yes, it's. But there are, as I say, there's 4 different types of malaria, and there's different treatments. So you need to speak again to your doctor, practice nurse, to find out which malaria is in which country, what medication they're sensitive to, so that you can take it. And again, with the time scale, you need to be taking it about at least a week before you go. Some of them you need to take a week, even 2 weeks before you go.
Before we come on to the 4 types, then I presume all medical staff in the UK have got access to up-to-date information because obviously these things move around, don't they, the countries, or the areas in the country. So you know when a place is hot and when it's cool as regards danger. So presumably everybody has got access to this information to advise the travellers to prepare for certain things, yeah?
Oh yes, we usually use something called Travax, and it's updated every day. There's a lot of professional websites that we go onto, and what should happen is you should fill out some sort of form to say where you're going, how long you're staying in each area, and then what we do is go onto the website, check what the outbreaks are at the time, what the malaria is, what the season is for it, what the medication is, and then we can then talk to you about the side effects of each one, which one's right for you, which one you're going to feel happy taking, and the cost of it, of course. And as I say, because it's updated, an example is I had a couple in this week who were going to Goa, and it was just bite precautions only, where you just use your sprays and what have you, and you don't actually have to take any medication. But recently there's been people coming back with malaria from Goa, so we'd had an update, and I was able to tell them that no, it's changed now and you do need to take medication. So it does change very quickly. Okay.
So from an equipment point of view, if you're going to a malaria area, there's obviously your mozzie nets, spray, what else? So certain types of clothing, I presume.
Yeah.
And what about the things you need to be aware of when you're in that?
Right, well, what we do is the ABCD of malaria, which is a well-recognised thing, and A is the being aware of the risk of malaria if you're travelling to a foreign country. B is to avoid the bites, by taking appropriate measures, like you say, wearing appropriate clothing, long sleeves, tucking your trousers into your socks or your sandals to stop the mosquitoes getting into your clothing, because reducing the number of bites will obviously reduce your chances of getting malaria. C, you've got to comply with whatever drug regimen you're taking for the area you're visiting. This is vitally important, and you have to take it for a month when you come back. Well, up to a month. Some of them is just a week, but most of them up to a month when you come back, because if you're bitten on the very last day, the life cycle of that mosquito is 4 weeks. So if you stop taking your tablets when you get back, you can still go down with malaria.
Right, OK. Well, does that cover most things on that?
No, the D is the early diagnosis. So if on return to your country, to the UK, you get a fever or are unwell and you've been to a malarious area, you should remember to tell the doctor, and that's up to a year after you've returned, because these fevers, these malarious fevers can hang around. The malaria can lie low, and then, you know, a year later you can get a nasty fever. If it's unlike anything you've had before and it catches you unawares, you're not sure what's the matter, you must tell your doctor that you've been to a malarious area so he could test you, because the sooner you're diagnosed, the better the outlook.
If somebody's on medication, prescription or whatever, I presume that when they're travelling they should take the paperwork with them.
Yeah, it depends what they're on. I mean, yes, if they're diabetic, like you've mentioned before, and they've obviously got to take needles with them, then, you know, it can be a bit dodgy at the airport. So it would be a good idea to get some sort of note from your doctor, some certificate to say that you need to carry needles. And when you take your needles and your insulin, remember to take things like cool bags and that you can store it. You know, think about the storage of it if you're going into very hot climates. And when you're packing it, try to pack it in separate, you know, distribute it between your bags so that if you do lose one of your bags, you haven't lost all your stuff. That's a good tip. And then at least you've got some, and you can probably get some more. If you go into Oz or Australia or New Zealand, I mean, it's just like being here, really, and you can get whatever you want. It's just if you're going to these rural places that you'd be stuck. And one thing not to forget is that you've got good travel insurance that is going to get you back home should you need it, you know, because you fall ill or because you have an accident, which can happen. I had a young lad who, 18, fit, healthy, fell over, simple accident, fell down embankment into a gutter, you know, sewage, what have you, in this gutter. He ripped his toenail off, nasty infection. They tried to treat it, but in the end he had to come home early. So it can happen. So make sure that your travel insurance covers you for getting you back home, because not all of them do.
Yeah, I presume really that most things that happen to people actually are very, very simple. It's either a simple hygiene problem or a simple accident that just turns a bit nasty.
Yeah. It is, because we can vaccinate you against all the really nasty things that we've talked about. You know, there are some nasty diseases out there. You know, it's a totally different environment, and we can protect you from that, but we can't protect you completely from travellers' diarrhoea. You can do your best, and accidents do happen, you know, and it's a bit more serious if you're in some remote area and you know, far away from getting help. So you have to be careful, and you need to make sure that you're always with your friends, and if anything does happen seriously, that there's somebody that can go and get some help, and that you're insured to be treated and to get you back home.
If you're not actually leaving the EU, I presume the E111 will cover you for most things.
It will. I mean, a very good leaflet to get is you can go to your post office and get the the Health Advice for Travellers leaflet, and it's very concise, and it has everything you would need to know, plus your E111 in it. It's got everything about the vaccinations and, well, everything we've covered today it will have in detail. So, and you just pick that up from your local post office.
Okay, well, talking about picking things up, because you can get a lot of these things also from most high streets. Let's just quickly say what should be in a first aid kit that you take with you, because there doesn't have to be a big kit, it just needs to have the right things in it. So what would you suggest people have just to cover knocks and bangs and little scrapes and so on?
Yeah, I mean, you can get a nice first aid kit off some of these sites on the web, and you can find that there'll be a link on the website, and you'll be able to go and get all your needs from there. And things to consider are essentials like your insect repellents, your permethrin, DEET. You need to take those. You need to take some sting relief cream, so that, you know, if you have been stung, I mean, it's not just mosquitoes, it's other things. They do get very itchy, very sore. You need something to put on them. And also an antihistamine tablet would be good to take, because that will reduce the itching. If you get things like prickly heat, you know, then your antihistamine will reduce the itching with that as well. A sterile medical pack is a good idea, because it'll have sterile needles that, if you do need any attention, dental treatment, or you have an accident and you need injections, you know that the needles you'll be having used on you are sterile. I mean, obviously don't open them before you need them, but take them with you, because, you know, these places haven't all got, they usually boil them, and you don't know how sterile they are. So it's a good idea to take a little medical pack with sterile needles. Don't take loose needles, not a good idea, and you probably won't get through customs with them. Water treatment, take that just in case you do go somewhere that you haven't got a reliable water source, and some bottles to put it in. And of course, sun protection cream, after sun, basic things like that, really.
And then if it's mosquito area, presumably, obviously, mosquito nets and other bits and bobs.
Oh, yeah.
You'll know about the actual trip itself, where you're going, and obviously, once you've taken the advice, you'll know what to buy. You don't have to buy everything.
No, you don't have to buy everything. And usually, if you go onto these sites and talk to your friends and people who've done it before, they'll give you an idea of what you need. There's loads of websites that will tell you lots about the country and things you're going to experience, and the sort of things you might need to take with you. There's a lot of guidance.
OK, well, let's talk about websites for a second. You've got a list of 4 there.
Yeah, got some good websites to go on.
Let's quickly mention those, and then we'll finish with the conclusion of, just to wrap up, you know, just to pray see it right down, what people should just be reminded to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have a look at these before you do anything, really. And one of them is Fit for Travel. If you put these things into your search engine, it'll come up, because they're very well used sites. So Fit for Travel, all one word, .nhs.uk. If you go on there, it's got an A to Z of the world. You just click on the letter, it'll bring up everything. So under M, you'd have the Maldives and malaria. Under B, you'd have Borneo and backpackers. You know, it'll tell you everything you want, and there's links, there's malaria maps, all about your precautions, every vaccination that you might need or may be recommended. It'll tell you the situations that you'll need more vaccinations than just the basic Hep A and typhoid that you don't pay for. Another one that is very good to go on is the Foreign Commonwealth website, which is fco.gov.uk, and that gives you a whole host of information about all the different countries, their customs, terrorism, you know, anything that's going on.
Up to date, really, isn't it?
Up to date, and tells you whether it's best to avoid it. It'll tell you the countries to avoid and tell you the countries to be careful of. And another NHS site, just immunisation.nhs.uk. There's a travel section on there, and again, there's links on it, and it'll take you to everything you need to know about travel. So there's lots to find. just on those 3, it'll probably take you to all the same, similar sort of places.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, just to conclude then, you're suggesting that people, as soon as they think about travel, or if they've probably already booked the travel, they're just hearing this podcast now, they really should get down to their nurse and as soon as possible and say, this is where I'm going, this is my itinerary, what do you suggest? Anything else?
No, when you do your itinerary, don't just put the country down. When you do, say what part of the country you want to go, because that will make a big difference on what you need. Because one part of the country you may not need to have malaria tablets, the other part you do. So you need to say where you're going, how long you're staying in each area. Because as we said before, if you're passing through, then you sometimes don't need to take precautions. But if you're staying for over a month in any rural area or remote area, you will probably need to have extra vaccinations. So plenty of time. Think about your safety and your health. Plan your route. If you are unwell, or you go down with throat problems every week, or you get ear infections, don't go out off the beaten track for any length of time. Do a sensible route. You can still see some very exciting countries, but stay safe. So you have to gear it up to your particular needs and your health status, really. Everybody can go. There's nothing to stop anybody, but you may just have to do slightly different routes to the next person. It's all very individual. So put as much as you can down of what you want to do, and then you can come to some sort of agreement as to the safest route to take that'll keep you happy, your parents happy, and the medical team happy as well.
Fine. And so the simplest thing would enjoy the trip, but just remember to wash your hands.
Exactly. And it's as basic as that.
This podcast hasn't been produced to increase your concerns about travel safety, but more to help you be aware that with a little forethought, any problems you might have should hopefully be minor. A big thank you goes to my guest Susan Taylor for taking the time to talk to me and condense a lot of information into half an hour. You'll find a link to a superb up-to-date health-based website next to this podcast on theoutdoorstation.co.uk. So until next time, folks, happy planning, happy dreaming of your great escape, and of course, safe travels.
This independent programme is produced and hosted by theoutdoorstation.co.uk.